If you visited my wife or I out on the table that we had out front, I had 4 of these Abuelos de Jalisco artifacts. For about the last 20 years, we've been hearing about these ancient alien artifacts coming out of Mexico. There are some very popular individuals that have been pushing these, that they're 8,000 to 10,000 years old. Definitely want to give credit to Jennifer Stein. In 2018, we were at the UFO Congress, right? And she approached me and showed me these, and she's like, well, what do you think of these? They're coming out of Mexico. And I was like, wow, that looks like all different types of aliens with a lot of Mesoamerican cultures. I was fascinated, got hooked on it. So for the last 6 years, been doing a lot of research, carting my wife back and forth to look at these collections throughout the US and to go into Mexico to conduct on the ground, boots on the ground investigation into them. So many people have paid a lot of money for these. These artifacts sell as high as $80,000 a piece. The ones that I have outside, I have 4 very small ones. I had to pay $100 each to get them. Again, some of the more intricate ones, up to $80,000. We know an individual we met in Los Angeles. He had a $400,000 collection. And I felt really bad because I was invited to talk at this presentation, and he was a fill-in for somebody that couldn't show up. And he was going to talk about his Abuelos de Jalisco artifacts. And right before that, I went into, I believe these are not all real. And let me show you why. And this was before the evidence I gathered this year. I wanted this to be a game changer. I really did. I spent a lot of money, a lot of time going to these very unsafe locations to look into this. On the left, I just want to show you that I really do archaeological work and anthropological work. I don't go to places and take photos on it and let people come with me and let it be a vacation, for everybody. On the left, we're on top of the pyramid at Tula. I have my magnetometer on, and it looks like about 1.5 feet below in the pyramid, there's a gold object buried there, right where we're at. And then on the right, I think this is the first time my wife has seen this photo. It took me a while to find it. This was my first or second dig. This is the island of Cozumel. So this is a Maya. I got to spend 6 weeks excavating those steps, so I was pretty proud of them. But again, my least favorite part of anthropology is the archaeology. People go, why don't you show the archaeology part of it, the digging and all? Because nobody is going to watch me dig the bead site out for 6 weeks. They're just going to show you 30 seconds of it. So on the left are the objects that I have. I'll be more than happy to show them to you after this. So most of the ancient alien artifacts have been coming out of Jalisco, which is a central state in Mexico. The supposed ruin sites are south of Abuelos de Jalisco. One location is near Cerro del Toro, which is Peak of the Bull. It accounts for many of the ancient alien finds. You may also have the Los Altos Jalisco region on the opposite side of the highway, where the darker gray pieces supposedly come from. Now, currently it is unsafe to be at these locations. The drug cartels are fighting for territory. Since 2019, 48 police officers have been killed in the city or the surrounding suburbs. Making modern reproductions and presenting them as ancient alien relics have become a major business for this area and their economy. A percentage of those profits are finding their way to the CJNG, which is the Jalisco drug cartel. You don't want to piss them off. This goes to tell you just how lucrative this business has become. So these bodies were located where most tourists are taken to dig up these supposed ancient alien artifacts. This just happened like 6 weeks ago. So again, I don't recommend you go there. I'll take you, but it'll cost us a lot of money because we'll require a little bit of security. Great people, by the way, in the town. They don't really understand what they're doing, or what these are being turned out for. So the townspeople claim that they've been finding these strange alien artifacts for over 70 years. However, the Mexican government makes no claims to their authenticity and does not consider them legitimate ancient artifacts. It's simply too controversial for them. But that hasn't stopped independent researchers from attempting scientific verification. So these are the types of sales ads being used to sell the pieces. They almost always cite the carbon-14 dating done to an Oleg Elistratov collection by the University of Arizona. There was also another individual that had them test 2 samples. I'm not going to go into who that was, but testing itself was performed by C.J. Easto before he retired from the University of Arizona in 2016. Many of the sellers are in a small town called Aguascalientes, Mexico. There's about 6 stores that are full of these, selling them in in Aguascalientes. Reason being because it's the nearest major international airport to Abuelos de Jalisco. It's like 25 kilometers west. But I mean, look at that little tiny one, $1,111. Calling this an authentic Aslan artifact with DNA on it, they gave it a $9,800 price tag. Again, look at the sales pitch involved in these. And right here, remember we were talking about that estimated age range? So they're telling everybody it's between 5,000 and 15,000 years old, and that carbon-14 date showed that. A couple more were carbon-14 dated by a private company out of Florida called Beta Analytic. The laboratories have stopped performing these tests after feeling that their names and reputation have been and continue to be dragged through the mud. So this is the Accelerator Mass Spectrometry Lab at the University of Arizona. The lab, we contacted them for the carbon-14 dating of those 2 pieces. Dr. Greg Hudgens heads up the department. We contacted him and we talked to him. Mr. Hodgins' signature appears on the Oleg Elistratov carbon testing document. I have all that information if you're interested, the lab numbers. Mr. Hodgins clarified that their lab did not remove any artifact piece themselves from its original placement, such as an accent eye or a tooth from an artifact. So he had no idea if contamination occurred during the process. He never saw the artifact, nor confirmed any sort of provenance or authenticity of any artifact's discovery. Real quick too, so when you hear the word provenience means it's come out of the ground, and it was done by a accredited licensed museum or a university with the archaeologist and their assistants there. That's the provenience, out of the ground. Provenance is in the care, custody, and control of those artifacts once it leaves the ground. So that's the difference between when we discuss provenience and provenance. So that provenance, the authenticity of the artifact's discovery, they have no clue about it. So their labs never received an actual artifact, only a small amount of scraped dust, which could have come from anywhere. Mr. Hodgins cautioned about assuming that their findings proved anything about the authenticity of any artifact, or even the age of organic material used as glue. This cannot be confirmed for a number of reasons. He provided a very convincing and understandable reasons based on principles and scientific modalities. Can test results like these be deliberately and easily falsified? Well, the answer is absolutely yes. Mr. Hodgins explained that any petroleum products which are commonly used in glue material would automatically show up with dates of 5,000 plus years, strictly because of the age of the petroleum products themselves. So mixing a 50% or less petroleum glue products with any kind of organic material would push the materials testing to this date or even older. Mr. Hodgins explained that their lab is grossly misquoted on many TV broadcasts and web-based streaming programs, claiming that they dated numerous objects. Far too many artifacts are being associated with just 2 carbon-14 tests. Hence, the Oleg Elistratov test results document has been attached to numerous artifacts by numerous production companies and sellers of these supposed antiquities. Now, these are but a few ways to create that aged, archaic look and feel to fake an artifact. I discussed these with Alyssa Tate. She's the director of laboratory operations at the Direct AMS lab out of the state of Washington. Now, the lab unfortunately closed its doors in 2023. They were a private company that provided carbon-14 dating for a fee. Even the private companies require a suite of pre and post sampling photos to facilitate association of the sample with the source object and to verify chain of custody. But this still requires the customer to be forthright in the information that they provide. So first thing about this slide, the University of Arizona did not receive the artifacts, only the photos from the owner, along with the small sample of material supposedly from both artifacts in the photos already labeled by the owner of the objects. So what's wrong with this? The supposed artifacts were tested, well, because the person provided $500 fee for each one of the samples. The University of Arizona only discussed the glue and at the very end stated it contains a protein-based material. This was done over a decade ago before the university knew what these people were going to use this information for. Now, this exact carbon-14 test results page has been used on thousands of these faked ancient alien artifacts to sell them. It's part of the sales pitch now. So Mr. Hodgins explained the importance of provenance. This means in order to have any kind of verification of any artifact's authenticity, a bona fide university engaged in the discovery and research of archaeological artifacts is imperative, or some established museum pieces that were discovered in the past might provide some historical reference points. Can cultural context to these artifacts be proven? This might help to establish some validity for similar artifacts. An academic archaeologist finding objects could create a chain of custody through the process of discovery with photos and research with the assistant present, where no monetary benefits to any single individual occurs. This way, the artifacts are part of a documented process typical of a large, well-documented excavation done with proper archaeological methodologies. This would be required for any museum or any academic university to be involved to further study and authenticate an artifact. Even if the entire artifact is shipped to the AMS labs, they could not verify its provenance without knowing its historical setting. By mixing the petroleum glue-based substance into any other organic materials, this would contaminate the accuracy of any carbon-14 test, producing extreme dates of antiquity. So if you note here, looking at this, the stone was already worn out before being used to create the art piece. So it already looked aged from the onset. The way that the archaeologist saw it when he looked at this was, why is it that the lines that are carved always end where there's damage instead of the damage taking away lines that should have been there? For any object to be proven to have an ancient past, the AMS lab would need to be testing bone or wood materials. While the bone could be tested for its age, the lab would not be able to verify the age of the carving on the bone. So the antiquity of the artifact will still be in question merely because of the chain of custody, private ownership. So once an object has been purchased through vendors selling these artifacts, it makes age verification of the object next to impossible. So meaning, even though that bone could be very old, say 10,000 years, they may have actually carved into it 50 years ago, and you can't date the carving itself. How can any artifacts coming out of the ground through a process of unauthorized excavation be assessed as real, especially if the glue material could have been tampered with? How can the carbon dating test reveal anything relevant? It can't, not without other earlier steps mentioned. So if we go over this as an example, you look carefully, there's faked marks, meaning there's scratches added to look older than it is. It looks to have been tumbled at the outer edges in a tumbler. Pitting is not correct, only on the outer edges and lines of design. Different tooling at semicircles or circular cutting. Glyphs are added without any type of readable sequence. This was assessed by an INAH archaeologist, Juan Velasquez. Juan works at Teotihuacan in central Mexico for the Mexican government. This is a pipe artifact that may be able to have organic material scraped out from the inside and carbon-14 tested. Again, however, it looks faked. Aging is not correct. The glyphs are random and in no order. Pitting is lacking in spots, overcompensated for in others. But it looks amazing, right? And by the way, no resin could be found in this. So even though it's supposedly thousands of years old, it was never used for anything because there was no resin available. Probably want to use your pipe. Okay, so this is a modern creation. This is pitting and scratching to achieve an aged look. It's not weathering nor carbonic acid over eons of time. No deterioration from being buried in the ground. It's intentional markings. This is actually a replica that I watched being created in Mexico, and they still made me pay to participate to watch. I mean, any way they can make money, they do it. So, but I just thought it was really interesting. He has those stereoscopic microscope there, and he works under those while he's carving it. Now, I want to make one important comment that would be on the opposite side of the argument, but I believe I'll cover it fairly. So people state that an artifact is fake if you see modern tooling used, but who's not to say that thousands of years ago an advanced culture did not exist that had pneumatic, electrical, or vibrational tools of some sort? There are many Native American cultures that state that the giants known as the Starnake used such tools in their mining, art, and building design thousands of years ago. Now this is Aztec, possibly Toltec glyph-style characters. I made sure to go pull the codex that's very similar to it. This art style was not used until 900 to 475 years ago. So how then is it found with other artifacts that show Maya-style art, which is from an older time period? How is it possible that cultures that never came into contact with one another because they were separated in time by hundreds, if not thousands of years, are found together? Or if these objects are 5,000 plus years old, how are Aztec characters being used? So the Aztecs, they didn't exist until around the 12th century Common Era. Finally, I wanted to show you several pieces that were properly excavated. Their provenience is not called into question. Being a genuine artifact is not in question. This one is at the Gilcrease Museum in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's stated to be Hacha style from Veracruz, Mexico. And here's what's funny. The archaeologists that excavated it and those that have it at the museum, they labeled it, because they didn't know what to label it as, older than most things but unknown date. Yeah, so things even stumped them, all right? Very interesting subject matter, right? But notice that this still does not look like the aliens that we're accustomed to seeing today and what we're seeing coming out of Abuelos de Jalisco. So this is another one. It's possible that this is from Guerrero, Mexico. They have it labeled, it's also at the Gilcrease Museum as unknown origin, unknown date, and they also have it style questionable. I believe subject matter should also be questioned here. We get what it is, I don't know, but it's definitely something to look into without having to look at the faked objects that we're coming across. This too is a legitimate artifact, supposedly Olmec, but unsure. The glyph writing that is yet to be deciphered on it. But notice how this looks complete. Even the damaged areas show a loss of linear cuts, and the aging is correct because of that. So the damage has actually taken away part of the glyph lines. And then this one we came across at the museum in Chihuacan, Mexico, on the Pacific coast. Again, just interesting subject matter. So where did my most recent discovery on these supposed ancient alien artifacts come from? Came from the Toy Museum of Mexico City. Awesome place. Very few people know about it. If you're there, I recommend you go visit. It has almost every single toy ever made. Senor Roberto Shimizu was who let the cat out of the bag on the subject matter. He is the owner, architect, and curator of the establishment. He's been collecting for 9 decades. This is Mr. Shimizu showing me how he documents each and every single item at the museum. He is old school, does not like computers. So we got to go through about 4 hours of these books, which was exciting. Now, there are 6 levels to the museum with over 1 million pieces, including the need to take up 2 spaces in 2 10,000 plus square foot warehouses. So I'm on the top floor, and I come across this. I'm like, oh, look at that, Mesoamerican culture and aliens. And then I see that over in the corner. Like, whoa, wait a minute, hold on. Remember, up until finding the Toy Museum, I was hoping to find proof that at least a few of the original artifacts were the real deal, showing an ancient past full of ET origins. This is what I found at the Toy Museum. I thought I came across the mother lode. I could barely film this long before I burst out of there, went running down 5 flights of stairs to Mr. Shimizu and asked him, what do you have going on up on the top floor? He's like, what toys are you talking about? No, come with me. It took him about 15 minutes to walk those 5 flights of stairs. Whew. It was a long 15 minutes for me. Everything inside the room, he stated he collected from the mid-1950s until the end of the 1960s. The artist that created them wanted his creations to have ET and Mesoamerica tied together. The creator, he said, was fascinated with the supposed Roswell UFO crash. It's all the man could talk about. And he was a huge history buff for Mexican cultures, ancient cultures. So what did he do? He was an artist. He did what artists do. He put together and created an amazing modern art. Did it on all types of mediums, including the bone. The original ancient alien pieces began being created, he stated, in 1952. Mr. Shimizu laughed, and he told me that he couldn't believe the work of his good friend had become such a super hot topic in the United States and Germany. I asked him how his friend, the original artist, got those in Abuelos involved. He stated that many of the artists of the time knew each other, and some of them in Abuelos loved the subject matter. Over time, he stated, it has turned into what we see today, very interesting modern art and nothing more. That's it. Thank you.
You studied anthropology and archaeology, a dual major, and that's fascinating in itself. And then you got into investigation work, a private detective and also police investigation. How in the world did you get to this subject matter from your education and your police, professional police investigation work?
Yeah, so anthropology and archaeology is really investigating the past. You're investigating ancient cultures and civilizations.
Right.
And I mean, if there's current or prior law enforcement here, you know, after a few years, you get sick and tired of having to investigate criminal, you know, activity because, I mean, it takes a toll on you. And I'd always figured that I actually got my degree while I was working for the Bureau of Investigations at Ventura County District Attorney's Office in California. And I always said, I'll put up with what I have to put up with now, and I know that at some point in the future I'll be able to investigate what I want to investigate. But the tools are the same, you know, how you talk to people, how you do the research, it doesn't change. I was regional loss prevention manager for several very large retail box stores. And you know, you deal with criminal and civil investigation there. The 10 years before I started doing this, I worked special investigations units, was the regional special investigation manager for a middle-sized insurance company dealing with it. And it never changes, you know, it's the same steps. Mm-hmm. It's just now I'm investigating what I find extremely interesting, which is this high strangeness, this phenomena, ufology, cryptozoology, the giants, you know, and I still feel that at some point there's going to be something that ties it all together that we have yet to discover. I believe that true origin point is in ancient Armenia, which is now Turkey, and that it all spread out. But being able to backtrack is just as good as finding the true origin. You know, if I can do it backwards, let's do it that way.
One quick follow-up question, and that is, did you have an interest in this subject matter prior to or at the time that you were doing your more conventional investigation work?
Yes. So, as a matter of fact, I don't remember. Dave, how long was it about a year ago that you guys were up here?
About a year and a half.
About a year and a half ago, they did the police stories of high strangeness, things that have occurred with law enforcement. One of those stories that they talked about with the walls in the house, the wooden walls coming to life, that was me when I was an El Paso police officer. That happened in September of 1994. freaked my partner out so much that eventually he became, we just found this out, he became a pastor. And unfortunately, he died 3 years ago, and I didn't find out until about 4 months ago during COVID. But apparently it affected him so much, he never could get past that. So I've, since I was young, have had, I guess, phenomena occur around me. So that's, I've always had an interest, yes. Very young. Yes.
Are you familiar with the tridactyl bodies that were found in Peru about 7 years ago?
I am, yes.
What do you think of them?
Honestly, I have trouble believing that they weren't all pieced together from different species, from what I've seen. Now, I have not been able to see them in person, which I would love to. And I would like to see the parts of the reports, the autopsy reports that they did, that they would not allow the public to see. Because I think there's some data there that they're hiding on purpose, and I don't understand if it is legitimate why they would not show that. So I'm not sure.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure at this point if they're real or not.
So you alluded a bunch about the data that you're collecting. I'm a AI data science nerd.
Okay.
So my question is, what is the type of data that you're collecting around these sites? I know that you showed us a couple charts, but what other types of data are
Great
you?
question. So a lot of what I'm collecting is the magnetic and electromagnetic data points from the ground to look for, I was kind of talking about it, how they were trending high and low in one spot, and it shouldn't do that. So with the search for the voids and for these large metallic objects, that's the main data point collection. But I'm also looking at where the petroglyphs and the pictographs are located and other artifacts that we're finding. As a matter of fact, I found 2 Spanish coins, a half real and a real, up at the ranch from the 1700s. And so any type of artifacts, we're data point plotting those to see if it kind of shows cultural locations, and if ones that have a mass, a thicker plotting, if there's something below ground at those large, heavy plotting areas.
Did you get to keep the reals?
Yes, so I kept the reals because they were on private property. If they were on BLM land and I had found them, I would have to tell you I would turn them in. Unless they were found on private property. They were found on private property.
Okay, we have time for just one more question. Shane?
It might be a two-parter. What do mainstream archaeologists say about the elongated skulls and the fact that the volume is different than an enormous skull that might have been bound?
Yeah, so that, and you just kind of said the most important part. So as they elongate the skulls and they board at a young age, you can alter the shape of your head, but you can't change the volume inside, the volume capacity. So there are several skulls that have a very large volume that are different than Homo sapien that they don't quite understand. The rest they'll just chalk up to cranial deformity, or on purpose or not. But I always ask, what were these people mimicking? Why did it make them elitist or this upper class unless they were mimicking their gods? And in order to do that, they had to have been gods that were walking among men. And everything we take back, I can show you historical data that no matter where you start out, if you start out in Mesopotamia, in the UK, in South America, in Malaysia, all comes back to these people of great stature, which would have had a higher volume capacity.
Then the second thing is, I know we had Dwayne Ollinger speak here a year or two ago, and they alluded to a lot more of paranormal activity on Blind Frog Ranch, but I noticed the show doesn't show anything about that. Is that by design, or is there not much occurring, or it occurs and you guys aren't allowed to say?
So it is by design. Discovery Channel wanted the show to be mainly a search and a hunt for treasure. However, as that evolved, they saw a lot of paranormal activity taking place. Season 1, at nighttime, at about 10 o'clock at night, the crew was out filming 2 of the cast members, and they came back to base camp. And the 2 PAs, the assistants, were locked up in the SUV with shovels in their hand, crying. And they were, Chad was finally able to get them out of the vehicle. They wouldn't come out of the vehicle. And he asked them what was going on. Well, they said that a large orb was going right by them, and as it passed the SUV, it shaped into a full headdress Native American chief. And he turned and he stared at him as the orb just kept going right by, and freaked out. Now, we tried to get hold of them to put that on the show this year, and they moved to the UK, and they didn't want to have anything to do with the paranormal that occurred on the ranch. They were just like, they don't want to be near the place any longer. So yeah, a lot more occurs by design. It's more of a treasure hunt show, but because of the area and everything that happens, you can't help when things like that show up. So it delves lightly into high strangeness as a subtopic, and not designed like Secret of Skinwalker Ranch to be going after that specifically.
Thank you.
Okay, James Keenan, thank you so much. It was great.
Thanks for having me.